18 years ago, I moved into a homeless shelter in Boston. I had accepted a job at the shelter, and I moved into the bunks for a year so that I could better understand and respond to the challenges of homelessness. But one thing I did not anticipate is getting exposure to a quiet crisis that's now gripping our country. One of my bunkmates was named Jason. Jason, to this day, is the most loving parent I have ever known. He was 25 years old, single dad, and because of an issue that was completely outside of his control, was evicted. He and his son lived in Jason's car for 2 months until his son's teacher understood their situation. And one day when Jason went to pick his son up from school, he was met by a police officer, a worker from the Department of Children and Families, and right there on the steps of the school, Jason lost custody of his son, and so Jason moved into the bunks next to me. Jason's story is not unique. It's part of a larger pattern that's happening all across our country. Our social safety net is tattered, and sometimes no matter how responsible you are, an unexpected event like a family or health crisis can send a family spiraling into poverty, into eviction. Evictions used to be rare in our country, but now because of real wages decreasing, costs of housing and childcare and healthcare increasing, it's become an epidemic. The average cost of the rental debt of a family who experienced homelessness by way of non-payment eviction in Boston last year was $1,700. Eviction isn't just one problem. Eviction is like 10 problems, because when you're evicted, your credit is ruined. It's unlikely that you'll ever qualify for housing subsidy again. You've lost your possessions. You're in a debt spiral. Like Jason, often your family is broken up. And that's creating a deep and jagged scar on the next generation. The eviction crisis is one of the reasons that the average age of a person experiencing homelessness in the United States is 9. So how does this happen? If a family is being evicted for a non-payment, a property owner has never had an alternative. They can't forgive debt, period, until now. The Renew Collaborative has worked with tenants and landlords to create an economically sustainable solution to this, and we're preparing to scale. So now, when a family comes to court, the Renew Collaborative will meet that family, identify all of the drivers associated with their eviction, create a blueprint with that family to mitigate against the risk of any of those drivers happening again, pay the landlord $700 to buy some time, and to work with the family for 12 months while the family repays the balance of that debt. What's interesting is this program, by any measure, has had staggering results. With over 10 years of perfecting this program model, we've prevented over 2,000 evictions. After 4 years, only 5% of the families we've worked with have experienced a non-payment eviction. By any measure, this is having a profound impact on the trajectory of families' lives. But in doing this, we also learned something else very interesting. The Boston Housing Authority opened up their books and showed us that it was costing them over $10,000 to evict a family. That's because of the turnover of the unit, the vacancy of the unit, the legal fees, constable fees, storage fees. All of that was costing them over $10,000. It costs the Renew Collaborative $2,000 to prevent the eviction from happening. And so guess what? We approached the Boston Housing Authority and asked them if they would create the nation's first per intervention reimbursement rate for intervention prevention services, and they did it. Oh, thank you. I wasn't looking for an applause. I was hitting the wrong button. So there. And so we're in a unique situation where we have an economically viable way to scale. So now, every time we meet a family in court, the Boston Housing Authority will pay us to prevent that eviction from happening. We have multiple contracts, and yet we need help. Our goal is over the next 2 years to scale this out to half of Massachusetts. We have most of the evictors, the private property owners, who are evicting these families have agreed verbally or in contracts to begin these programs in all of their developments. And so our aim is that over the next 2 years to replicate in half of the state, and over the next 5 years to be scaled across Massachusetts. This program is perhaps the most significantly potential organization to put the eviction crisis to rest. A close friend of ours, Matt Desmond, just authored a book called Evicted. And when meeting with Matt and his research, he identified that the Renew Collaborative is the innovation that he's been waiting for. No one else in the country has monetized an eviction prevention program because no one else has longitudinal data around the outcomes and also the expense data around the benefits to the property owners. Jason finally regained housing. He regained custody of his son, and yet the trauma that occurred with Jason was absolutely unacceptable and unnecessary. His son spent over 6 months in foster care. Jason lived with me in the bunks of the shelter for over 6 months while he scraped together money and saved for his down payment, the first lesson in security for an apartment. All of that was unnecessary. His property owner spent thousands of dollars to evict him, and if the Renew Collaborative had been present, none of that would have happened. We have an opportunity to make a great dent in a crisis, and we're asking for your help. I thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.